Okay, moving on to the next team we will be going over here today in the Big Ten. This is going to be the team that I have finishing in 12th place, which is actually going to be an improvement from last year's squad, and that is Fred Hoiberg and his Nebraska Cornhuskers. And Coach Hoiberg is going to be entering his second season on top of the job at Nebraska. And last year, it wasn't a great season for Nebraska. I think we could all admit that. But I do think in year two, Fred Hoiberg finally does have his roster the way he wants it, and he's using that same strategy that he used to use while he was at Iowa State, and that is just bring in as many transfers as possible. And they have a lot of transfers on this team, including Teddy Allen, the JUCO transfer, former West Virginia and Wichita State player, even though he never actually played in a game for the Wichita State Shockers. But we know he could score at the Power 6 level when he was at West Virginia, albeit, it was 3 years ago. He really balled out and was a very important member of that team that made it to the Sweet 16. They also will bring in Delano Banton, the transfer from Western Kentucky, and in 2018-2019, he only averaged 3.4 points per game, 3 rebounds a game, and 2 assists, but I really like the kind of player that's his mold, the 6'9", 6'10 kind of player, point guard that could really see over the defense, and I do think that kind of player is really trending in today's world of basketball. They will also bring in Kobe Webster, the transfer from Western Illinois. He'll be a senior. He averaged 17.1 points per game, 3.2 rebounds per game, and 3.6 assists per game. And Shamel Stevenson, transfer from Pitt, 6'6" redshirt junior. He only averaged 3.8 points per game and 1.8 rebounds per game, but that was in limited action, and he got run off by Jeff Capel. Nebraska does bring one real big contributor back from their squad last year. That is Ivan Odragu, the 6'9 sophomore. He averaged 5.7 points per game, 6.3 rebounds per game, and I do think we can see those numbers improve. They also bring back Thorbarn Jarnson, a guy who's played in this Nebraska rotation for a couple of years now. He averaged 8.8 points per game, 4.8 rebounds per game last year. And then also another transfer they bring in, Trey McGowens from Pitt, 6'4 junior, 11.5 points per game, 3.3 rebounds per game, and 3.6 assists per game. So when I look at this Nebraska roster, the common trend I realize is, they're going to be trying to play Fred Hoiberg ball, and he is using that same strategy that he used while he was at Iowa State in order to attempt to make this Nebraska look good. And I feel like there is a chance that this Nebraska team is going to be better than they were last year, and I think they will be. I have Nebraska predicted to come in 12th place because I think Fred Hoiberg is a good basketball coach. I think that his first year at Nebraska, it just didn't go great because he didn't really have that much talent, and I understand why some people are skeptical of Fred Hoiberg and the process that he's going to use now that really the rest of college basketball has kind of caught up with it. But at the same time, at a school like Nebraska, I feel like you're going to be thankful to get as much talent as you could get. And I do think having Trey McGowens and Teddy Allen, I know they're both transfers, but that's a really good 1-2 punch if they were anywhere close to where they played at their previous destination. Trey McGowens and Xavier Johnson, it was kind of inevitable, I feel like, when they were at Pitt, especially if you watched the Panthers last year, that one of them was going to leave. We were just going to have to figure out which one. Ultimately, it was McGowens, and I think playing in Fred Hoiberg's kind of offense, I think he could succeed, and it just really, like every other team in this Big Ten, the league is so good, the league is so deep that I don't think you're just going to individually win games based on your talent. You're going to need to win games based on everything you could do on the basketball floor and players finding roles. And with this Nebraska team, they also have Derrick Walker, who played in the Tennessee rotation behind Grant Williams, Admiral Schofield, and when they had all those NBA guys, along with Eduardo Andre, the 6'10 freshman, which a lot of people at Nebraska have been saying some pretty good things about. So Nebraska is going to be a team that just has a lot of options to get the job done. And I feel like it's going to be very fascinating to me to see with all of these transfers who they left their previous school thinking that they're going to have a legitimate role on a Nebraska team. And they didn't know how good necessarily that Nebraska team was going to get. But it kind of reminds me of Eric Musselman and his team at Nevada 2 years ago when he just brought in literally every transfer in America and had so much depth and ultimately ended up playing 8 or 9 guys. I think Hoiberg will play a pretty deep rotation of about 8 or 9 guys as well. But at the same time, I'm just curious to see how exactly he splits minutes because he has JUCO transfers, he has sit-out transfers, he has grad transfers. transfers. He has returning players that are going to want to get better under his watch. So I'm going to be very fascinated to see how exactly Fred Hoiberg treats all this while he's the head coach of Nebraska. And there's more size all across the team, which I like. I feel like last year that was one of the big problems for this Nebraska Cornhusker team, and I feel like they should improve on both sides of the ball with the talent level being higher, and that should maybe enable Fred Hoiberg to more implement his style a little bit more. Last year's team was so far behind the pack, though, that even a significant jump will still likely leave Nebraska in the bottom tier of the conference. But finishing higher than that is possible if Teddy Allen, Trey McGowan, Delano Benton, all those guys break out. But at the same time, once again, this Big Ten is so good, and I just think it's going to be very hard for a team like Nebraska to take a jump unless all of their transfers really get on the same page quickly and develop that chemistry and develop their roles. And unfortunately, even though I do think 12th place will be an improvement from years past, I'm just not necessarily sure if I could trust this Nebraska team to finish much better than that. And I feel like it's going to be a very important season for Fred Hoiberg to just show at least a little bit of progress, just because last year the season didn't go great. And I don't want to say he had an excuse, but at least he had something to say in response to that. You know, he could say, oh, we just didn't really have that much talent, and I didn't really get an opportunity to bring in my own kind of guys. And now this season, Fred Hoiberg has really done that, bringing in transfers, and he has once again delivered that same strategy he used to use while he was the head coach of Iowa State, now at Nebraska. And in this tough of a Big Ten, once again, when this trend has really become much more popular and mainstream in college basketball, I'm just not necessarily sure if it is always going to work when you look at the way Nebraska played last year and when you look at the way a lot of other programs around college basketball have really used it. So there are a lot of transfers on this team, which could mean some good things, but it also means that in order for Nebraska to succeed, a lot of things are going to have to go right. They also lose Cam Mack, who went pro, Deshaun Burke, who went pro, Jervay Green, who transferred, and then Hanif Cheatham, Kevin Cross as well. Those are all guys that played significant minutes on this Nebraska team. So we'll see how they do without him. But at the same time, I do think there is much more talent on this year's Nebraska squad than last year. They will just have to ultimately work out the chemistry.